Sa mga mabibigat pang local and international issues na may malaking epekto sa ating buhay at kinabukasan. Ito po ang inyong katipon na si Butch Valdes kasama ang ating co-host na si Itos Valdes. At iba pang mga kasama natin dito sa Save the Nation Movement, Philippine LaRouche Society at ang ating pong partido politikal na Katipunan ng Demokratiko Pilipino, KDP. No? Kami po lahat dito ay nag-aanyaya sa inyo na magbahagi sa ating talakayan sa pagsusuri ng mga kasalukuyang problema at paghahanap ng kaukulang solusyon. Okay, magandang gabi at andito po tayo ngayon at kami po nagagalak at naibalik na po kami sa sa YouTube, no? Ang YouTube po medyo napakabilis mag-suspend, no? Maski na ilalagay po natin yung mga ibang video nang gagaling sa mainstream media. Mainstream media po ng Amerika. Kung yun po ilinalagay natin dito, tsaka ka pa rin i-strike ng natin pong laman. So much for freedom of the press, no? Tsaka freedom of the press doon sa ibang lugar nito, sa Amerika, sa the so-called areas where they uphold, right, these types of freedom of speech, sabi nila, no? Nung pala pag medyo taliwas ang sasabihin mo, ninenervous sila, ayaw nilang papakinggan ng taong bayan. Nevertheless, we're tonight we decided to discuss with you initially these things about the Nuremberg Code, no?
Yeah,
Nuremberg
the Nuremberg trials, where
Mm.
did this come from? And kasi maugong ngayon ang sinasabi nilang mandatory vaccines. So we wanted to go back. Was there a time in history na minandate po, na punersa ang mga tao na magpaturok o kumuha ng isang bagay na ayaw nila? So yes, the last recent time was during World War II, during the rise of the Nazis. Yung partido po ni Hitler during World War II na pinilit nila yung mga tao kahit ayaw nila magpabakuna ng experimental drugs. Wala silang choice. Binigyan po sila. And the Nuremberg Code, which we will talk about later after, during the trials na finormulate ng mga hustisya from America and the Western nations, na we will go through it, pero
bawal na ngayon.
bawal na without consent.
So,
So,
tatandaan niyo po si Hitler at siguro yung kanyang favorite doctor na si Dr. Mengele.
grabe na. Joseph Mengele.
Joseph Mengele. He's he used to do experimental on the Jews, no? At lahat po ng ginagawa, hindi lang pagtuturok po ng vaccine, kundi lahat po ng ginagawa niya to experiment on how human beings parang mga daga, no? Imbes na hayop ang gagamitin nilang guinea pig, etong mga tao,
Lab rats.
ang ginagawin nila. Dahil ang dami nilang mga Jewish prisoners, no? Now this was discovered, among other things that were discovered right after the war, right? And Germany had to surrender. At nagkaroon ng parang Nuremberg trials, trials
In Germany.
of all of those that were part of this the Hitler machinery, no?
Yung Nazi movement.
Yung Nazi machinery nila,
War crimes.
to be charged with
Crimes
all
against
kinds,
humanity.
crimes against humanity, crimes to war, and then meron pang mga crimes whatever, and then basta you are part of this whole conspiracy to commit war or participate in the war. These were the different charges that were levied
right.
on the people. There were
Mahaba po yun, yung Nuremberg trial.
yeah
And
126 days daw
yeah,
about that.
and not just the Nazi leadership, but yung mga collaborators na businessmen,
Right.
mga pinasok nila. Kasi tinulungan mo yung Nazi, parang ang papalabasin nila, or pinalabas nila, is it, tinulungan mo tong organization to murder and experiment on people, to commit crimes against humanity. Tinulungan mo sila. So kahit businessman ka during that time, or kahit ordinary citizen, basta makita na tumulong ka o may pruweba na tumulong ka kahit hindi ka nasa gera lumalaban.
Basta kasama ka ni Hitler.
Oo.
No.
Actually, yung soldiers, hindi nga na di ba?
Hindi.
Yung German, but because they were following orders. Pero yung mga tumutulong, conspiracy, actually, kulang pa nga sila.
Yung mga sa kanyang mga industrialist na kasama niya, si
Right.
Krupp. Krupp.
Yung parang coffee machine na Krupp, silang gumagawa yan. They're industrial,
Industrial giant na
manufacturing.
sila.
Yeah.
Pero yun ang ang isa sa pinaka yung may-ari nun, yung he was also indicted in the Nuremberg trials. But while he was in jail, his physical condition daw suffered.
Masyadong matanda na.
Masyadong matanda na at inano na lang siya in the name of humanity, of being humane.
Right,
No?
right.
May iba na-indict at nakulong. No?
Yeah.
Buti na lang nakalusot yung mga ibang Amerikano. No?
Alfred Krupp.
Alfred Krupp. No? Yan yung buti na lang nakalusot yung mga ibang Amerikano. Alam nyo ba, nung pumasok si Hitler sa power 1933, no? At nagano siya, nagplano siya ng parang industrialization ng Germany at ang kanyang
Yes.
nag-design ng kanyang ekonomiya magaling. Mamaya pwede natin pag-usapan si Hjalmar Schacht, no?
Yung finance
advisor niya, tsaka yung naging economic minister niya. Isa sa mga dati hindi pa sila nagkegera sa Amerika no? Pero 1930s
after World War I, diba?
1930s pumasok ang mga Amerikano diyan sa Germany.
Right.
Dahil may plano silang mag-industrialize. Inimbita si Ford Motors.
Ford and
Tsaka GM. Okay?
their car,
Oo, para doon sa kotse.
motor vehicles or airplanes,
Nung pumasok sila doon sa Germany, tapos nagkaroon sila ng parang joint venture with sa isang mga Germany doon.
Yeah.
Biglang nag-retool sila at gumagawa na silang mga tangke tsaka mga trucks.
Para sa Germany.
Oo. Nung nahalata nitong mga Amerikano na hindi, papunta na ito sa gera at gusto lang namin gumagawa ng kotse.
Right.
No?
Right.
Naghiwalay na sila. Iniwan na nila yung kanilang operation sa Germany. Siguro binenta na nila at bumalik na sila sa Amerika. Kasi noon, nung magde-declare na ng war against Germany, and Germany declares war against the United States, it was illegal already.
Right.
No? Sa panahon ni Franklin Delano Roosevelt, kung nakikipagnegosyo ka dyan sa dealing with the enemy, no? So it was may mga pero yung mga ibang bankero natin, bankero ng Amerika, katulad nila Prescott Bush, tsaka si Averell Harriman, tuloy pa rin, no? Tuloy pa rin nilang kinakausap si Hjalmar Schacht dahil kinakailangan nitong mga financing requirements ng Nazi Party. Bankero, parang umiiwas. Pero naputol na rin yon dahil kinasuhan sila ni Franklin Roosevelt.
Yeah, sabi niya, huwag niyong tulungan Tutulungan nyo kami, lalabanan naman yan, tutulungan nyo pa sila. So, dalawang magkalaban, tutulungan nyo, loko ba kayo? So, you had something like Franklin. But you have to remember po, ang Germany po was one of the most industrialized nations in history at the turn of the century, sasabayan ng US. And in fact, yung leader po, 1900s, by 1900s po, just to give you a context, siyempre Hitler tayo. Pero years before, 30 years before, 1900s, ang US became the number one industrial nation in the world during the time of William McKinley. Nung kinupkup nila tayo as Philippines, the US was number one in the world in terms of industry. Bakit? Kasi during the time of Lincoln, 1865 to 1900, they were able to build the railroads sa Amerika. Biglang nag-industrialize. When you say industrialization, kailangan nila ng more steel, more chemicals, more like that, more oil, ganon. So, they had to produce it. Hindi kailangan bumili sa labas, nag-produce sila. The America became number one in a very short time. Yung Germany, led by a man named Bismarck. Otto von Bismarck. Sabi niya, gusto ko yung ginawa yung ng Amerika. Kung paano nila in-industrialize yung kanilang bayan. And they started to do railroads. Ngayon po, if you go to a map of the world, you go to Germany and you say railroads in Germany, makikita nyo para siyang spider web or even more. Para siyang net. Or
Talagang it's a network.
ang daming railroads.
Railways, yeah.
Doon sila nag-develop. And when you develop railways, you need steel, you need iron manufacturing, you need industry. Si Krupp, yung sinabi ni Chairman kanina, was one of the biggest industrial families in Europe at the time. From the 15th century up to the latest one. But when the Nazis took over, they were helping Nazis produce.
Yeah.
Kasi gamit You need tools, you need industry, you need for the war machine. Di naman kailangan. Gusto
Wala
natin
pinagkaiba yan yung mga oligarko tsaka yung gobyerno pag nagsama, di ba? Ganyan po din yan, no?
So,
Itong oligarko nagsama, meron din sila mga bankero nagsasama.
right. So,
basta tapos ginawa nila yung plano nila.
Right. So, World War II, World War I, tinamaan ng Germany ng World War I. Nakapaglaban pa sila. So, sila lang versus lahat ng powers ng Europe. Sumama pa yung US dyan. Versailles Treaty, 1919, talo yung Germany. Kinuha ngayon nila ang lahat ng mga industrial regions ng Germany. Ito yung mga Western, British, amin na yan. Kasi talo kayo, amin na yan, akin na yan, akin na yan, akin na yan. Pinaghatian nila.
They looted Germany.
Yes.
They took everything out of Germany that was the basis of their productivity.
Right.
So lahat ng rail systems, lahat ng mga factories, they dismantled and cannibalized them and brought it to England and to France. No?
Yes. Tapos ginawa nilang business.
Ninegosyo nila.
So, while they were doing all of this, yung population ng Germany, nawawalan ng trabaho, pabigat ang sitwasyon nila. Pero yung mga oligarko at yung mga kaibigan nilang bankero, ngayon, doon pumasok ang Ford and GM from the States and international na kumikita rin ng pera.
Right. Bago yun gusto ko lang idagdag.
Sige.
Nung panahon ng 1920s kasi nga natalo ang Germany sa First World War, di ba? Pagdating ng 1920s, they looted Germany, the superpowers. The powers then were England and a bit of US, pero France and
European power
and England.
Yeah.
They looted lahat, pati daw mga baka, at
The
tupa.
agricultural, lahat ng agriculture.
Pagkatapos, wala nang natira sa mga German people. Pagkatapos, sabi pa nila, mga bankero, sabi natin muna, natalo kayo Sa aming panangin dahil natalo kayo, may utang kayo sa amin. No?
Ah.
So, at ganito yung utang ninyo. Kung gusto nyo tutulungan namin kayo, papahiraman namin kayo, pero ganito ang utang nyo. So, anong mangyayari? Ipapataw mo yung utang ng Germany dito sa mga bankero, no? Pero wala na silang pambayad dahil sinarado mo na yung mga factories nila. So they went into a hyperinflation situation. Emprenta na lang sila ng emprenta na hindi na nila mabayaran ang kanilang utang, no?
Yeah.
Ito yung crisis na pinasukan at bagsak na bagsak ang ekonomiya ng Germany.
Right.
At dahil dito, siyempre yung mga tao umangal. At nung umaangal sila, galit na galit sila sa mga namamahala because they seemed incompetent and they could not do anything. Dito nag-rise ngayon
Yung ultranationalist.
oo, yung mga extremist, no? Extremist sila Hitler
Right.
at yung Nazi party nila.
Kasi sabi nila, kasalanan daw ng mga foreigner, kasalanan ng mga Hudyong businessman, kasalanan daw nilang lahat. At tayo tinabunan yung pinakamagandang bansa sa buong mundo, Germany, with a rich history. Tinalo tayo, tapos inaapi tayo ng mga lahat. So galit yung mga tao. That was the culture at the time, in the 1920s. And I think we have a picture, if you have the Weimar hyperinflation, where you can look for it. This was the time of the Weimar hyperinflation.
Right.
You wanna
But
give up?
good na lang.
Yeah.
Tapos papunta na po tayo
Yeah.
dito sa building of the Nazi party.
Right. So, because nga, walang trabaho yung mga Aleman, yung mga Germans. And they're a very proud people kasi yung history po nila, one of the Europeans' powers yan. Tapos ngayon, parang pulubi na sila, hingi kasi tinalo sila sa gera, tapos kinuha yung pinaka-yaman nila. Their ability to produce, their agriculture lands. Everything. So yung buong Germany, parang pinatay mo, tinapakan mo pa. So,
You imposed a debt.
You impose a debt that they will
they
never
cannot pay.
Because yung mismong pambayad ng utang nila, kinuha mo rin. Parang familiar dito yan.
Yes.
So, but
That's why I wanted to mention that.
Right,
No?
right.
Because ang nangyari, yung Germany had to prepare IOUs,
Yes.
bonds,
Yes.
yung German bonds.
Yes.
What is a bond? It is an IOU. So, this was being used, no, as one-step payment of their debt.
Right.
What is that? The bond? It is an IOU. Like parang may utang ka sa akin, imbes na bayaran kita dahil wala pa akong kakayanan, magbibigay ako sa iyo ng bond, ng promissory note, no?
Tama.
At itong promissory note na ito na binibigay ng Germany dito sa mga US, sa France, saka sa England, no? These are bonds. They became now what you call
Speculative.
securities, no? Yung tinatawag na marketable securities.
Sa Wall Street, gano'n.
Oo.
Or London.
Ngayon, binebenta nila ngayon yan para kumita. Yung may hawak akong utang bond, na itong bond, dadalhin ko sa marketable securities, i-securitize ko. Tapos, sasabihin ko, sinong gustong bumili nitong itong dokumentong to, na nagsasabi, kikita ka ng ganitong porsyento.
Right.
So, merong bibili. Tapos, encash mo na yung isa. Tapos, binebenta itong mga bonds. No? Ang dami niyan.
Yes.
Tapos, siyempre, speculation. Umabot na.
Sugal.
Oo, hindi na nag-iisip yung mga tao na yung pinagmulan nitong bonds na ito, walang kakayanan magbayad.
Right.
Hindi na nag-iisip. Basta bili ka lang ng bilit dahil aakyat yan. Pag umakyat, kumita na yung isa, bibili ka din, hahabol ka para kumita ka din.
Maraming bumibenta, maraming bumibili.
Yan yung tinatawag na speculation. Nag-build up ngayon dito sa stock market sa Wall Street.
Correct.
Umabot na ng napakataas.
Yeah.
Nakita nila, yung hawak-hawak mo na mga dokumento, mga bonds,
Yeah.
ay mapopornada dahil ang nagkumpisa nitong pagkakautang na ito walang kayang magbayad.
Oo.
No? Nag-crash. Nag-crash ngayon noong 1929 sa Wall Street. No? At ito na nga ang nangyari sa Amerika din. Bagsak din yung ekonomiya ng Amerika. Pero yung Germany, abang bagsak, ang ginagawa naman nitong si Hjalmar Schacht, kumukuha siya ng mga utang. Kanino umuutang? Sa mga bankero ng Amerika,
Britain, France.
bankero ng Great Britain tsaka sa France, no? Para palakihin itong Nazi party. Umuutang sila for industrialization.
Yeah, that's a little later, right? After
Yeah.
the Weimar. Gano. Pero yan ang design. Sabi niya, sige, bagsak ang ekonomiya natin. Tsaka sabi ng mga bankero, then after the Great Depression, paano naman tayo babawi dyan? Kailangan may babawi. Parang kontrolado pa rin natin yung ekonomiya ng ano. I wanted to show a picture there. Baka you can show it. Yeah, no? That
Reichsmark.
this is the time na they had to print money. This is the Reichsmark. So you have that.
Tignan mo yan. Alam niyo po, there was a time,
10 billion.
1922,
Yeah.
no? They called the
Weimar.
greatest hyperinflation period, no? Ibig sabihin po ng hyperinflation, emprenta ka na lang ng emprenta ng pera, wala nang halaga yung pera mo. Ganyan ang nangyari sa Germany. Wala nang halaga dahil emprenta na lang sila ng emprenta ng pera. Ang nakikita niyong picture dyan, ito yung parang kanilang pera, 10 billion na Reichsmark. No? Ang nag-umpisa po yan in January 1922, ang exchange rate nila noon, 400 Reichsmark to $1. No? Yun ang palitan. By December of the same year, December 1922, the exchange rate was something like 4 billion Reichsmark to $1. 4 billion ba yun? Di ba? Somewhere there.
Yes.
No? Billion na po. Yan ang ibig sabihin ng hyperinflation. Bigla-bigla na walang halaga yung pera mo. You can see a picture on the right side. Children using blocks of money
To play.
no, to play. Ginawan laruan na lang dahil wala naman halaga yung pera. Ganyan talaga ang nangyari noon. Ito yung ekonomiya na
After World War I.
after World War I, no? Kasi 1919 natalo yun. After World War, ganito ang sitwasyon sa bansang Germany noon. Kanya nagka-wendang-wendang.
Right.
Yung nakita niyo yung ginagawang laruan, yung pera, meron pang mga ibang mga litrato
Sige,
dyan.
meron ka pa dyan?
Yung
ginagawang
panggatong. Ayan.
pagkatong, yeah.
Ayan, no? Yung pera ginagawang panggatong na lang, no? At pinapasok sa heater o kanya pagluluto, no? Ganyan ang halaga ng pera, papel na lang. Papel na lang talaga.
Mas mahalaga pa yung papel.
Oh. These are there are other pictures, but at any rate, what we're trying to say here is nawala na ng halaga yung pera dahil emprenta na lang ng emprenta.
Right.
No?
So, the economy, ang ekonomiya po natin, then we've been saying this, and this is like maganda tong episode natin ngayon because it's like a continuing episode from all our every Sunday, no? Like last week was Illuminati and all of this. It's still connected po. Pero, ang economy is not anymore attached to the money. Wala na. Kasi wala nang buhay dito eh. sa gumagawa. Wala nang steel production, wala nang agriculture production, wala nang energy. Pero yung pera, andun pa rin, pero wala nang halaga, wala nang connection.
Ang napaka na dahil ayan yung 657 billion.
Wow.
Yung nag-umpisa yan sa 4 ano yun
1923
1923
May, 48,000.
48,000
Wow.
the rights marks to $1, no?
Tapos December, look at
By
December.
December it was 4.2 trillion
Grabe.
to $1.
Wala.
Ganyan po yung hyperinflation. Kung mamalengke daw yung mga tao, truck ang dala nilang pera para lang bumili ng mga ilang prutas,
Yeah.
no?
Yeah.
Ganyan daw ang
Kung may
nangyayari.
natirang prutas,
Kung meron. But that's the condition of hyperinflation.
ayan, no, parang yung may cartoon dyan sa kaliwa na ginagawa sa newspaper, parang ano lang, sige lang,
Emprenta.
ano ka lang, spitting out money,
Yeah,
paper money.
you're just printing out money.
Oo.
Kasi po, ang importante dito, para malaman yung what we mean by inflation, yung perang umiikot sa sa ekonomiya mo, dapat may katumbas na
Right.
goods that you can buy with the money. No? So, kung ang goods mo hindi dumadami, tapos mag-emprenta ka ng pera,
Right.
lahat ng pera, siyempre papunta doon. So, anong nangyayari? Embes na ganito lang yung halagan, 10 pesos to for every one bottle of soft drink, no? Dahil emprenta ka lang ng emprenta, no? Ang nangyayari, 1 million pesos for one bottle of soft drink. Ganyan po ang hyperinflation na wala na ng halaga, no? At ito po ang sitwasyon nung papunta na sa pagbagsak ng ekonomiya ng Germany at wala na silang kakayanan magbayad ng utang nila at yung bonds nila ay sumabog na rin, natamaan pati ang bansang Amerika at ang buong mundo dito sa sitwasyon na ito. Later on, I will remind the people here when we talk about the situation today.
Right.
Dahil yung sitwasyon na yan, tungkol sa hyperinflation, is present right now and in a worse condition.
Yes.
But we will not go there now. No, we're just talking about Germany.
Pero it's worth it to talk. That's why medyo na pumunta kami sa history kasi kailangan yung konteksto. So, ito nangyari sa Germany. And during, this is in the 1920s, hyperinflation, 1923, gutom na. Ibig sabihin rin, yung pinapagkitaan ng mga bankero ng Germany, wala nang halaga. Kasi nakita na ng tao, hindi na makabayad yung Germany. So nag-isip na naman ng panibagong scheme o panibagong racket itong mga bankero. Tao naman nila, do you have Yalmar Shack? Tao naman nilang nalilagay dyan is, consultant is this guy called Yalmar Shack. Okay, and Yalmar Shack was a professor and
He was a
economics
banker.
gano'n. So kilala niya itong mga European bankers, lahat ng mga kumbaga oligarchs.
Yeah.
Okay, so nag-isip sila ng bagong skema kung paano natin so sino ang susuport? Kailangan, sabi nila, nag-decide sila, kailangan yung Germany hindi natin papabayaan maging anarchy, or kailangan yung Germany hindi natin papayagan maging independent sovereign nation. Kailangan magsuporta tayo ng tao. Kailangan maghanap tayo ng grupo or tao na magiging siya yung bagong mamumuno sa Germany.
Yung taong nakita nila nagagawa ng na dahil sa pagpapabuhay ng ekonomiya, dahil kailangan nilang umutang no? So ang taong hinanap nila, yung taong may experience at kilala sa financial sector, sa mga bangko, no?
Kumbaga kaibigan nila.
Kakilala nila. Ang isa sa pinaka maraming nakilala diyang experience ay si Yalmar Shah. Hjalmar, tapos Schaccht,
Yeah.
Yalmar Shah.
He is known as Hitler's banker.
Yeah, yung British name niya is Horace Greeley. Anyway,
Talaga? May British name siya.
but this guy, Yalmar Shah, was the one in touch with the bankers. Why did they need that? Because he was going to borrow money. No, he was going to borrow money for Germany.
Yes.
Because Germany was going to embark in a industrialization program. Remember, nasira na yung kanilang productivity. Bubuhayin ngayon nila dahil andyan naman si Krupp, si Albert Krupp, at
Yeah.
meron pa silang ibang
Marami. Yun lahat ng mga
tao.
brands. Daimler, Mercedes-Benz,
Oo.
Audi. lahat
Yun ang
sila.
mga ginagawa nitong si Krupp.
Sige.
At nag-imbita pa sila ng mga ibang industrialist at kanya nga pumunta dyan. Itong sila Ford
GM.
Motors, tsaka GM. Pumunta din dyan ng Standard Oil
Yes.
ng US.
Ng
no?
Rockefeller.
Nag,
Yes.
Nag-ano din sila dyan.
Kasi
Nagnegosyo
kikita
din
sila.
sila. Kikita sila. So, ito mga ito, nung nakita nilang meron mga ganito, mas madaling umiram ngayon sa mga international banks. Nakaandito yung mga American companies. No? At mababayaran kayo sa mga utang namin. So, nagpahiram ngayon itong mga bangko. Bank of England, Lazard Freric ng France, at itong mga sa United States, yung kila Prescott Bush, tsaka si Averell Harriman. No?
Yes.
Nagpahiram sila. So, nagkaroon ng direksyon ngayon ang industrialization program ng Germany. Pero ano ang lumakas? Dahil lumakas ang Nazi Party.
Yes.
Yung Nazi Party by 1933,
Yeah.
si Hitler became the chancellor.
Yeah.
Chancellor, siya ang parang pinaka-prime minister ng Germany at dinirect nila ngayon. Hindi nila alam, may plano siyang manggera.
Right.
Na
Right.
si Hitler lang yata at mga iba niyang ang may plano na. Pero sige lang, industrialization.
Kasi ang usapan is that the Nazi Party will help them keep control of the German
Yan.
economy. Yan si...
Ito po si Adolf Hitler, tsaka yung kanyang economics minister na si Yalmar Shah. Okay, yan. Yan yung kanyang... dahil... let's go na to the end. So nagkaroon na po ng gera. Itong si Yalmar Shah naging presidente ng
Nazi Party.
Nazi Party tsaka ng bank nila tsaka
Yes.
became economic minister.
Right.
No? So mataas na tao na si Yalmar Shah. Kaya economic siyang nag-direct ng industrialization. At siya naghanap ng financing. So ito na, pumunta na sa gera. Mag-fast forward na tayo.
Okay, so nagkagera na, we can talk about the actual war. But during the war, alam po natin na madami pong namatay at madami pong nilagay sa concentration camps na tinatawag. Nangyari rin sa atin dito sa Pilipinas with the Japanese because they needed cheap labor. So they put whoever mag-invade sila, tinatawag ni Hitler, blitzkrieg. Invade sila sa isang country na walang malay, walang laban. Kunin lang mga prisoners, lalagay nila sa kampo. Sila gagawa ng mga bullets, sila mag-assemble ng mga damit, ng mga soldiers. So, yun ang ginawa ni Hitler.
Yeah, and he was looting the countries that they were invading.
Right. Lahat ng yaman
Kinukuha nila yung assets, kinukuha nila yung pati yung yaman ng mga tao doon, no?
Right. Gold.
Because they control them. Pasok ka, ikaw yung invading ang army. They go to the people and then they go inside their houses and they get their wealth, no?
Yeah. Tapos wala silang pag ayaw mo papatayin ka. Kunin lang nila. That's in the war. So they invaded. So this is what and then after the war, natalo na si Hitler. Sabi nila nagpakamatay na. Talo na yung Germany, surrender. Japan, nag-surrender na rin. May Nuremberg trials ngayon na nangyari. Nuremberg, Germany. Sino ang nagpasimuno ng trials? Itong US, number one. And then with the British and Russia. Sabi nila, kailangan mag-trial. Bakit? Kasi marami kayong ginawang crimes against humanity. Hindi lang gera, namatay sa gera. Pero may iba kayong ginawa na hindi naman dapat. Hindi namatay yung tao dahil sa gera, dahil sa ginawa nyo sa kanila. At lumutang diyan ang mga yung ginawa nilang what do you call that, yung gas chambers, tapos yung mga eksperimento. Lumabas din yung mga eksperimento kasi yung mga doktor ng mga Nazi, matatalino yung mga yan. Actually, a lot of them went to the Western countries after. Pero matatalino yung mga scientists ng Germany at the time because they were very educated.
Meron trivia, yung gas chamber na yan came from a chemical company in Germany, which was one of the biggest oligarchs then. No? At sila ang gumawa ng Cyclone Z.
Yeah, Cyclone
Ito yung gas na ginamit dito sa mga gas chambers na pumatay ng 6 million Jews. Yan ang nangyayari pagkakuntsaba mo talaga ang mga oligarko. No?
Ano pangalan ng...
Forgot.
Ako, I remember. Bayer.
Oo.
Yes.
Bayer. Bayer.
Yung mga anti-ipis. Bibili kayo? That's the same
Yung
company.
aspirin.
Bayer. Because they were a chemical company. Tapos sinabihan sila ng Nazi, gusto ko poison. Yan ang produce nyo. Wala silang choice. But they participated. Bayer. Diba? So, and also owned by families long before yung mga company na yan. Matagal na pong company yan. Chemical. Because you're an industrialized nation, you need chemicals.
Yung yatang yung may-ari at that time na nahuli din sa Nuremberg trials, he's the one who committed suicide bago siya mapatay. No? Kapares ni Goering. Goering committed suicide before he was hanged.
Yeah. So that's a history. So marami silang pinatay kasi nung nag-opensiba na yung Russians from the east, napupush back na yung Germany at medyo naiipit na sila. Itong Amerikano came from France and Germany. They were pushing Germans back. Okay, during the close of the war. Di na sila makalaban. Anong gagawin natin dito sa mga prisoners of war natin? Yun ang ginawa nila. Pinasok sila lahat sa gas chamber at pinatay po nila. Yun ang sabi nila.
The final solution.
Yeah, yun ang sabi ni Heinrich Himmler, yun yung final solution. Anong gagawin natin dito sa mga to? Kasi, so that's the chapter of the war that's very horrific. Yun ang subject ng trial, ng Nuremberg trial na sinabi nila, kailangan tignan natin kung sino pa yung mga to. Anong ginawa nyo? And why did you do it? And after the Nuremberg trial, they also came out with a 10-point code called the Nuremberg Code. Ibig sabihin, these are things that these are the 10 points.
Parang mga prinsipyo
Prinsipyo na dapat sundan ng humanity para hindi na mangyari ang nangyari. So dapat parang dapat lahat ng countries nag-agree dito sa Nuremberg Code. And for a long time, we did. All of the countries. So, and we have a short clip. Gaano katagal yung Nuremberg natin? 4 minutes? Okay, so about the Nuremberg Code, then balik tayo, we will discuss.
The Nuremberg Code is the most important document in the history of the ethics of medical research. The code was formulated 70 years ago, in August 1947, in Nuremberg, Germany, by American judges sitting in judgment of Nazi doctors accused of conducting murderous and torturous human experiments in the concentration camps. the so-called doctor's trial. It served as a blueprint for today's principles that ensure the rights of subjects in medical research. The 10 principles of the Code are: first, the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. This means that the person involved should have legal capacity to give consent, should be situated as to be able to exercise free power of choice, without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the elements of the subject matter involved as to enable him to make an understanding and enlightened decision. This latter element requires that before the acceptance of an affirmative decision by the experimental subject, there should be made known to him the nature, duration, and purpose of the experiment, the method and means by which it is to be conducted, all inconveniences and hazards reasonably to be expected, and the effects upon his health or person which may possibly come from his participation in the experiment. The duty and responsibility for ascertaining the quality of the consent rests upon each individual who initiates, directs, or engages in the experiment. It is a personal duty and responsibility which may not be delegated to another with impunity. Second, the experiment should be such as to yield fruitful results for the good of society, unprocurable by other methods or means of study, and not random and unnecessary in nature. Third, the experiment should be so designed and based on the results of animal experimentation and a knowledge of the natural history of the disease or other problem under study, that the anticipated results will justify the performance of the experiment. Fourth, the experiment should be conducted as to avoid all unnecessary physical and mental suffering and injury. Fifth, no experiment should be conducted where there is an a priori reason to believe that death or disabling injury will occur, except in those experiments where the experimental physicians also serve as subjects. Sixth, the degree of risk to be taken should never exceed that determined by the humanitarian importance of the problem to be solved by the experiment. Seventh, proper preparation should be made and adequate facilities provided to protect the experimental subject against even remote possibilities of injury, disability, or death. Eighth, the experiment should be conducted only by scientifically qualified persons. The highest degree of skill and care should be required through all stages of the experiment of those who conduct or engage in the experiment. Ninth, during the course of the experiment, the human subject should be at liberty to bring the experiment to an end, if he has reached the physical or mental state where continuation of the experiment seems to him to be impossible. And finally, 10th, during the course of the experiment, the scientist in charge must be prepared to terminate the experiment at any stage, if he has probable cause to believe, in the exercise of the good faith, superior skill, and careful judgment required of him, that a continuation of the experiment is likely to result in injury, disability, or death to the experimental subject.
Okay? Alright, medyo maliit siya, no? Pero you can research this online. But the number one, I would like to read it out lang. What the most important thing for us is, number one sa Nuremberg Code, and this is the medical Nazi doctor's trial, is important that the voluntary consent of the human subject is essential. This means that the person involved should have the legal capacity to give consent, should be so situated as to be able to exercise free power of choice without the intervention or any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or any other ulterior form of constraint or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the elements of the subject matter involved as to be able to enable him to make an understanding and enlightened decision. So what we wanted, it's here in the Nuremberg Code na pinag-agreehan ng lahat ng bansa at the basis for which these doctors were tried. That walang choice ang mga tao, pinurok nila, in-experimento.
Yung pong mga Hudyo kasi noon, sinasabi natin,
Yeah.
ginawa nilang ginipig at ginawa nilang pang-eksperimento. Ito po yung ginawa nila dyan. Nung nalaman po ito ng mga judges, they wanted to do this precisely for the world to agree to,
Yes.
no, that it became the 10 principles that all governments or all people must abide by, no, when it refers to experimental medicines to be applied to people, no. At napaka-importante po itong Nuremberg Code because it comes to be very relevant today.
Right.
No? Not only today on a worldwide basis, but today on a specific country-to-country basis.
Right.
Tayo po dito sa Pilipinas, hindi ko alam kung alam po ng ating Pangulo itong mga ginagawa niya at pinipilit niya. Last year, in one of his speeches, he even almost jokingly said that he is the cousin of Hitler. Meaning he knows, he seems to know what Hitler was doing. And he was saying that there were certain reasons and benefits to what Hitler has done. No? That's the mentality of Duterte.
Kahit joke yan, hindi po nakakatawa.
Even as a joke. And actually, because of that comment, and a subsequent comment made by our Department of Foreign Affairs, Locsin, where he also said, when he was explaining the comment made by the president to the German foreign minister, when he was trying to explain it, sabi ni Locsin, meron din mga kabutihan na gawa si Hitler. There were still some, despite what he did, we can still see some good aspects of Hitler. Ginawa niya. Ang ibig niya sabihin, yung pagkokontrol ng tao at pagpapatay. Kasi ang discipline that is meron dyan sinabi that there are benefits to the final solution. No?
Sabi niyo.
Sabi ni Locsin.
Wow.
And this, of course, got the German government very angry because they were telling us, don't you know what we had done and the things that we had corrected because of what Hitler had done to our people? And yet you have these guys from the Philippines trying to say that Hitler did some good, no, in some of his methods. And they referred to the final solution. Can you imagine? Now, if you look at it from today's viewpoint, when you see that this thing is being imposed and what they plan to do in order to force us to do these things, the mentality that they follow, no, is not only scary, it's extremely dangerous
Delikado.
for us. No? Now, I just wanted to mention this as an aside, no? Because totoo yun, and you can check the records, and he has been quoted extensively when he said, the president said that he is a cousin of Hitler. No? Jokingly, ibig niya sabihin, pareho kaming pag-iisip. Can you imagine? So let's go back at the Nuremberg trials and
Oo.
what is happening right now. No?
Yes, so we wanted to put it together. Pero maganda po yung discussion with ano. So after the trials, of course, there many of them were put to were meted the death penalty. Itong mga Nazi officers, marami po sa kanila. And during the trials even, many of them said they don't feel that they did anything wrong kasi gera naman. And they don't feel that kami, you should try me for certain crimes that you yourselves have committed in your own countries. Ginanon nila yung mga ibang judges sa America. Some of which are the racist, the forced sterilization experiments of the United States, in the 1920s.
Yeah.
That's what happened, and we can of course go into that eugenics thing. We can go into that next week if you want. Pero sabi mismo sila yung mga na on trial. Kasi may mga judges, may mga lawyers, bakit nyo ginawa yan? Di ba masama yan? Sabi niya, ginagawa nyo rin naman yan eh. Kami lang natalo sa gera eh.
Tandaan nyo ba, di ba si Hitler was trying to put up the super race, di ba?
Yeah, Huber mentioned.
Uber mentioned and
Superman.
what it means was a super race. No? So yung mga Hudyo at mga yung kinakailangan, wala. No? Saka puro yung dugo. No? Para yun ang magiging ano ng Germany. Yun ang magiging symbol or epitomize what Germany was like. No? So tanggalin mo yung mga ethnic o yung mga
Walang halo.
Walang halo.
Kailangan pure
Okay.
breed.
Yung Aryan race ang tawag nila. Now, because of this, after the war, he was being criticized by many people in the US and in Europe. And the people of Hitler were saying, it is not us that started this
Right.
kind of thinking. No? And then he pointed to the British, and they pointed to the British and to America.
Yeah.
That America also had this idea of coming up with a super race.
Yes.
And the kind of programs they had
Right.
di ba?
In the 20s,
In the
the
20s,
eugenics.
meron eugenics. No? And who started the idea of eugenics?
Ay nako. Matagal na yan. But we can discuss this next week. I forget yung PowerPoint ko. Nakalimutan ko na. Pero this is a good discussion and to see. And during the trial po to, so may sagutan sila. Yung mga Nazis officers, none of them seemed parang remorseful na mali yung ginawa namin kasi hindi nila maintindihan. Ginagawa nyo rin yan eh. Kami lang ang mas matapang na ginawa na we took it to another step. Kayo, pero gusto nyo rin yan. Kilala namin kayo, mga British, tsaka gusto nyo rin mangyari yan sa inyo. Pero kami, nagkagera, natalo kami, that's why we're here. So, I want to show a short video of the Nuremberg trials para ma-feel nyo kung ano yung nangyayari. Medyo black and white to, pero maganda may YouTube video about this. So makita nyo, may explanation. Pero yung para siyang press release at the time, kasi wala pang daily news eh. It's a press release, gagawa silang newsreel during the 47, 48. Tapos si-ship nila sa Amerika, papakita nila sa mga sinehan. Kasi hindi pa widespread yung television at the time. So, tignan natin.
Attention! Tribunal!
Judges from Britain, America, Russia, and France assemble in Nuremberg's courthouse. Empowered to impose sentence of death, or such punishment as it may consider just, the tribunal sits in judgment upon 20 leaders of the Nazi Party. After a first day spent in reading the 30,000-word indictment, the unemotional tones of Lord Justice Lawrence, President of the Court, open the second day's proceedings.
On Thursday, the 18th of October, 1945, in Berlin, the indictment was lodged with the tribunal. and a copy of that indictment in the German language has been furnished to each defendant and has been in his possession for more than 30 days.
So begins the case of humanity against the makers of war.
The defendants to plead guilty or not guilty to the charges against them. Hermann Wilhelm Goering.
Thinner, and without the notorious medals, the once mighty Nazi number 2 still postures in the limelight. While he waited in the dock, he wrote a statement which he tried to read before entering his plea. He said, "Before I answer the question whether I am guilty or not guilty," and that was as far as he got.
Bevor ich die Frage des Gerichtshofes beantworte, ob ich mich schuldig oder nicht schuldig bekenne,
I informed the court that defendants were not entitled to make a statement. You must plead guilty or not guilty.
bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht schuldig.
Furious, the one-time Reichsmarshal shouts, "I declare myself not guilty." And now Hess, the mentally hazy Hess, the lost memory man.
Rudolf Hess. That will be entered as a plea of not guilty.
Ribbentrop, pale, nervous, picks up the refrain of not guilty.
Ich bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage für nicht schuldig.
Object lessons in psychology. The character of each comes out in the manner of his not guilty plea.
Wilhelm Keitel.
Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig.
Wilhelm Frick.
Ex-Minister of the Interior.
Nicht schuldig.
Julius Stracker.
Pronounced sane by medical experts, Jew-Baiter number 1 stands trial with arrest.
Nicht schuldig.
Walter Funk.
This is Hitler's ex-economic advisor.
Ich bekenne mich nicht als schuldig.
Hjalmar Schacht.
Hitler's money wizard varies the words, but still pleads not guilty.
Ich bin in keiner Weise schuldig.
Erich Raeder.
Ex-U-boat chief.
Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig.
The Nazi youth leader.
Baldur von Schirach.
Ich bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage als nicht schuldig.
Arthur Seyss-Inquart.
Ex-Gauleiter of Holland.
Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig.
Albert Speer.
Now the backroom Nazi and armaments chief.
Nicht schuldig.
There have always been ambitious and ruthless men ready to gamble with the lives of their fellows. Now, for the first time, international gangsters stand trial as common criminals. Goering, still trying to read his statement and still getting nowhere.
You are not entitled to address the tribunal except through your counsel at the present time.
Opening the Allied case against the defendants, Chief American Prosecutor Justice Jackson.
Of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated.
Goering was still switching from glum despair to spells of clowning at the end of the second day's proceedings. But the lengthening lists of counts covered by the indictment left its mark on everyone but Hess, who showed little interest in anything. Goering wrote sheet after sheet of notes and suggestions for his defending counsel. Ex-War Chief Keitel and Ribbentrop spoke only rarely. Hess came to life once. Perhaps he'd forgotten to remember he'd lost his memory. On the third day, Major Coogan took over the prosecution.
First, a brief reference to the history of the Nazi Party. The court will no doubt recollect that the National Socialist Party had its origin in the German Labor Party, which was founded on the 5th of January, 1919 in Munich. It was this organization which Hitler joined as 7th member on the 12th of September, 1919. At a meeting of the German Labor Party held on the 24th of February, 1920, Hitler announced to the world the 25 theses that subsequently became known as the unalterable program of the National Socialist German Workers' Party as a new religion, the faith of the blood, superseding in individual allegiance all other religions and institutions. The defendant Rosenberg and the defendant Streicher were particularly prominent in disseminating this doctrine. Much of the evidence to be offered in this case will illustrate the Nazi conspirators' continued espousal and exploitation of this master race doctrine.
Imagination sickens at the crimes laid upon the accused, now stripped of the trappings of power. The world's writ has run to Nuremberg, and justice waits.
Okay, so that was a clip from August of 1947. Nag-umpisa yung trials ng that was a clip from 1947. Pero nag-umpisa yung trials 1945. Right after the war. So, madugo po yan because there's so many things that they have to gather. Because parang kailangan lang i-justify. Actually, pwede nilang gawin. What they could have done was just sabihin nila, oh, ito Germany, may utang kayo sa mundo na naman. And you shouldn't do it again. Tapos kukunin namin ulit yung inyong mga industry and all of that. We will punish you again. Pero hindi nila ginawa yun. Kailangan, what they did, which was correct, is they put them on trial for the world to see, which is the Nuremberg trial. So lumabas lahat ng baho ng Nazis, ang ginawa nilang kalokohan, yung mga violence na ginawa nila sa mga inosenteng sibilyan. So sabi nila, hindi na gera yan eh. Crime against humanity na yan. Hindi na dapat maulit yan. Pag gera, dapat walang nangyayaring iba. So that's what they wanted to establish. And one of the things that came out of that was the Nuremberg Code ka. Kasi nakita nila yung mga medical doctors ng Nazi, parang wala ng karapatan yung mga taong pinag-eksperimentohan nila. Tinuturo po nila, tinitignan ko ano mangyayari sa'yo. That's why the 10-point, nasa online po yan, search nyo lang po sa Google, Nuremberg